Kirsty Brown. I'm the Executive Officer at Music New South Wales, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to FeedBack 2014 at Vivid Ideas. Indent and Music New South Wales pride ourselves on providing the first stop in education and industry opportunities for young people with an interest in music and arts. We run panels and interviews like the ones you're about to see today. We also give out $60,000 worth of grants every year to young people to help them put on their own all-ages events. And we regularly book the nation's best young and established musical talent to speak as educators. I'd really like to thank our partners and Vivid Ideas for making today possible. Thank you to FBI Radio, APRA, Alberts, and Arts New South Wales. So to kick off today, we're going to start with the most basic element of music, which is the song. So ever wondered why that catchy chorus got stuck in your head, or why you get super feels every time the strings come in, or even wondering are strings totally whack and outdated? To walk you through the foundational elements of songwriting, please welcome our first guest, who our Education Officer Jake Stone calls the most unhateable singer-songwriter in Australia. That's Josh Pyke. He is a one-man band and business unto himself, and 3-time ARIA Award winner. Josh is going to be on stage today with one of Australia's most respected producers and mix engineers, and that's Wayne Connolly. Between recording acts like Neil Finn from Crowded House, Josh Pyke and The Vines, he also made landmark albums with groups like Silverchair and The Living End. And today their session is going to be moderated by Lucia from APRA. So please welcome those guys to the stage for our first session. Thank you all.
Hi guys, thanks for coming out today. It's going to be a really great day. As Kirsty said before, I'm Lucia, I'm from APRA AMCOS. I won't be really talking about APRA AMCOS now, but later on in the day, my colleague Greg is going to be as part of the speed dating sessions talking about what we do, but it's my pleasure to be actually moderating these two lovely gentlemen. We've got Wayne and Josh. Kirsty kind of went over what they do before. Josh is an amazing songwriter, but Wayne is also a songwriter too. Didn't mention that, but his main kind of focus, I guess, would be doing production and engineering. And I kind of wanted to start off with maybe if you could just tell the crowd what a producer and an engineer does.
Well, it's a pretty broad term these days, the term producer, and there's a lot of overlap with engineering. I suppose it might be easier to talk about what it was traditionally, going back even until the late 90s, maybe a bit beyond. There was a pretty clear delineation between producer and engineer in a recording studio. So if you wanted to make a record back then, you'd go into a pretty expensive studio and you would have a kind of team of people to work with, and the producer would be more in charge of liaising with the band, helping with the song arrangements and songwriting, lyrics, and basically any aspect of the performance, helping the artist to bring out the best in their performance. But and the engineer would be more in charge of the technical side of things, like setting up the mics, doing a bit of EQing on the board, and compressing things. And in those days it was all based around tape, so they'd be taking care of the tape machine and running all the technical side of things. And the producer would sort of be the boss, telling everyone what to do, and they would be booking the studio and all that sort of thing. And they'd be sort of answerable to the record label, and if the artist is being, difficult, they have to get sort of caught in the sandwich between the artist and the label, and getting what the label wants, because the label is often paying the bill, and so the producer in some ways was, or still is, responsible for getting the label what they want, but also getting the artist what they want, and trying to marry those two somewhat disparate visions. Sometimes they're disparate. Yeah. And I think back even before that, from what I've heard in the 60s and stuff, it was really clearly delineated where the producer would just, be very removed from the actual technical recording. I mean, as things have gone on, producers now really do a lot of engineering as well, quite often. Back in those days, in the 60s, I think, from what I had discussions with people like Richard Lush and Jeff Emerick, who work with the Beatles, and a lot of them echo the same things that George Martin often used to lie on the couch in the Beatles sessions, and they would actually do all the nuts and bolts of the recording. Whereas perhaps someone like George Martin would then come in and do a string arrangement or something like that. But yeah, moving forward as things have gone on, and because technology's changed so much, the advent of digital recording and computer-based systems means that the term producer is really broad now, and I suppose anyone who composes and records their own stuff and puts it out there, they're a producer as well, producer-composer. And myself, I'm sort of in between worlds. I do a really wide range of stuff where I might be one day, recording a band from scratch, a band who are just setting up and playing live. I might be working with a single person like Josh to just evolve, songs using, various session musicians or whoever we want to pull in. Or I might be just mixing a record, and there's lots and lots of different things that go on, really.
Yeah. So do you think that has your role increased? Do you think definitely over time being a producer means a lot more than kind of maybe what it used to be back then, or?
It kind of does, I think. I think probably going back to the 90s, there was more, the band rehearsed their songs, maybe developed them live, and came in and just put down their live set. And particularly when you go way back, that's exactly what people did. So the producer probably just steered them and tried to get the best performances. And now there's a lot more to it. Yeah, you're recording, maybe 30 or 40 takes of a lead vocal, and then you're sifting through it and deciding whether that's good, and you're kind of overseeing every little guitar sound and every little synth sound and drum sound, and I think you're sort of, it's like a jigsaw now. You're building this sort of jigsaw that is quite elaborate usually, like a Rubik's cube, really. Yeah.
So why don't you talk about?
You know what I mean? A Rubik's jigsaw.
Rubik's jigsaw.
Yeah.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, you were talking about how the sound kind of develops, and I really wanted to talk to you, Josh, about how you develop your sound. So from when you might have an idea of a melody or a lyric, what kind of things you do to get yourself through that development of the song?
I'm a big believer in just following my instincts musically, so I kind of feel like your instincts will tell you the right way to go. If you start overthinking things when you're developing a sound, you might be, this is just for me personally, but you might be too tempted to try and emulate what's currently popular or try and copy a sound from something that you've heard. I think influences are great, there's no doubt that influences will seep in subconsciously, even if you aren't trying to kind of emulate something. But so, I mean, for me, like I'll write a song. I'll generally start on the guitar, but I've been starting on different instruments recently, which has been fun. And kind of get the bed thing down of the lyrics and the core of the song, the lyrics and the chord progression and the arrangement. And then I've got a studio at home, so I'll start recording it, and then I'll start developing the sound by just throwing things at it and seeing what sounds good, and then being quite brutal in taking stuff back out if it just starts to sound like there's too much. Because I kind of feel like, the vocals are always going to be a kind of, a big feature for me, but I always feel like there's at least one or two other real signature sounds in a song that really kind of help to make it sing. And you can think of a million songs where you realise there's the hook in the vocal, but there's also one or two production elements that are really key to making it sound like the song that you know. So yeah, but I mean the short answer is I just follow my. Is that on? I can't even hear myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you all hear it?
Can you add a little more 2K to my? Yeah. So I just following my instincts is the thing. I just try not to overthink it. Try not to be consciously influenced by too many things, and just try different things. And also, like, I like to try and make a guitar not sound like a guitar, for instance, and just mix it up, I suppose.
Did you ever start writing just lyrics first?
Yeah, I have started doing that a fair bit lately. I never used to do that, as I'm sure you well remember, but in the last couple of albums I've just written stream of consciousness, just prose, a couple of pages, and then I'll cherry pick little phrases out that sound, that sort of, I realise what I was subconsciously talking about, I suppose, and then I'll develop those and try and make something more poetic and concise and succinct out of it, because otherwise, But it's an interesting way to do it, because when you're writing to the guitar part or whatever, you often get stuck in your own habitual phrasing. Whereas if you write it all out first in prose, you kind of have to make the prose fit to the song, and so your phrasing comes out a lot more interesting sometimes. So.
Do you set time aside to write, or do you just write as it comes, or are you a bit more disciplined?
I'm disciplined. I'm more disciplined now because I've got kids, and so I've got to. When I'm on tour at the moment, I was touring this weekend, and in the past I had a whole day to myself, and in the past I would have gone to see a movie or slept or something, but I just spent all day writing and making stuff up because it's a good opportunity to do it. So I kind of write all the time. I'm sure all you guys who are musicians here always have your phone out, putting notes in your phone of lyrics and stuff like that. I do that all the time, and then I'll go back and find little bits and bobs, and especially on the road, you see stuff that will inspire you. So I'll just put in notes, and then like I said, I've got a studio at home, so I spend 4 days at home in the studio and just refining ideas and playing guitar and stuff. But the biggest issue, I guess, is it's different for everybody, but I've never been able to just sit down and... I can sit down and write a song that I will like, but in terms of really sitting down and coming up with something that really feels like it's representing my heart and soul and is honest and has the integrity that I like in a song that I'll put my name to, you can't manufacture that, and I can't really just sit down and go, now I've got to switch that integrity switch on and get that thing happening. So a lot of the time when I'm down in the studio, I'm just like sitting around waiting for lightning to strike, and it doesn't often happen. So sometimes I'll just have nothing to show, but then occasionally, and as long as lightning strikes approximately 20 times every 2 years, then I'm okay.
Do you guys collaborate creatively in the studio? Like when you finally bring something to Wayne, do you guys work together on the finished product?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, it varies from project to project, and this one, Josh is really disciplined and has really good ideas, and you were one of the first to have really elaborate demos that sounded really good. And
thanks, Wayne.
Well, it's just that. It was just the era. It was the timing.
I was the leader in my era.
You were the leader of the pack, yeah. But yeah, in that era, you would develop pretty good things on Pro Tools, but they would be more acoustic with, just little elements added, and then we would add drums or
MIDI. Yeah, I'd often do MIDI drums and stuff, and then.
Yeah. So in that realm, sometimes I would contribute guitar riffs or bass parts, but
I remember in particular the song Particles off Only Sparrows. I was 100% lost with that song, and I'd lost faith in that song. And Wayne was like, no, just, literally said, just go home, just let me have a crack at this. And I came back and it was awesome. So there's definitely times when you lose objectivity and you kind of have to let somebody else take the reins, and it's kind of no harm, no foul type thing.
Yeah. Wayne, I just wondered about that as a producer. What do you expect, or I guess hope, that someone would bring to a session with you pre-prepared?
Well, it always varies, really. It's like some sessions you go into and you're writing the songs from scratch, but I suppose I work with a lot of bands, and generally, yeah, it's great if the band has the songs already rehearsed and they've been playing a lot and rehearsing a lot. I would say, there's always things you've got to have in terms of mentally preparing for a session. If you haven't done a recording session before, I'd say it's good to be ready to experience the intensity of recording in a studio. It's quite full on, and you can be feeling like you're failing a lot of the time. Like whenever anyone comes to sing in a studio, it's quite hard, and you're kind of probably feeling like you're not very good at it, and I think everyone experiences that, except maybe you, Josh.
No, I definitely experience it.
Flawless.
So I guess if you're coming into a recording session, just being prepared to work really hard and know that you've got to work through some very difficult things, because there's a lot of artistic conflict usually. With bands there often is, and everyone has different ideas and you've got to try and bring them all together. And I think just keeping an open mind that everyone's opinion is actually going to be valid in some way, even though you might instantly think that it doesn't make sense to you. it's always worth trying everyone's ideas to see if you've got the time, to see if they're going to have any merit. And often they might not work, but something else will come out of it. And yeah, there's a lot of things you could say. I mean, generally I think it's also good to just be prepared to absorb yourself in the music when you go to record. A lot of bands still kind of, treat it as a time to get on social media and game all day, and it's like, to me, that's a bit dispiriting. It's like, this is the time for you to really absorb yourself in being an artist, and take the time to enjoy it and take the challenges face on, and not kind of, just
smoke weed.
Yeah. Well, the Beatles probably did that, so it's
Well,
right. Yeah.
I guess for obviously we're dealing with a young audience, and not many of them would have that kind of opportunity to get into a studio, but there are grants and opportunities out there to help you in there. And Josh, I wanted to talk to you about, you kind of started off really getting a grant from Australia Council. I'm just wondering, would you like to talk about your motivations about going for that grant and how it applied and how that all went for you?
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago now, but
Yeah.
the very first one I got was, I got two, which really helped a lot. And the first one was called, I think it was called Arts Buzz or something like that, or Buzz or something. And so I'd borrowed money off my folks to do a demo of my solo stuff, and I did it, but then I literally didn't have any money to do, to press up CDs. Back in those days, you still had to press up CDs. You couldn't email a SoundCloud link or something like that. But so I wanted to put together a proper professional demo with, proper cover art and stuff, and have it to be able to sell at shows, but also to distribute to people to try and get a management or a deal or something like that. And so it was a $2,000 grant, which was going to sort that out. And it was actually really easy. It wasn't a daunting process at all. It was a short application form, really easy to follow the instructions. You had to do an acquittal thing afterwards, which was easy as well, because it was all just, you just answer the questions.
Yeah.
It was only a one-page. You just sort of had to present a little synopsis of what you wanted to do, and I had the demos already, so I could burn a couple of copies of that to send in. And I was lucky enough to win that, and so that really kind of kicked things off. But it also gave me a great sense of confidence in the material, that it was actually worth pursuing, because that was prior to that I'd been in a band, and actually the band, we applied for the same grant as a band, but the band didn't get it, and I got it as a solo artist, and I was like, I'm out of here, fellas. No, not quite. The band was disintegrating, and I was like, this has some merit. I'm going to do this now. So it was really good for that, for both kind of confidence and also for the cash to actually, progress with what I was doing. And then the second one was a much bigger one, and that was called a New Works grant or something like that. And that was like 20 grand, and that basically covered the recording of the first mini album. And it was very helpful because I was signed to a label, but I was able to use that money towards recording anyway, which helped me recoup from my first recording, which, as anybody who's had a record deal will tell you, it's record deals traditionally, I don't know what they're like these days, but traditionally they're really unfair towards the artist, and it's really hard to pay the money back. So this helped a lot. It kind of got me off on a really good footing, and those grants helped me enough that I've actually started a grant in conjunction with APRA, called the JP Partnership, and we did it last year. It was $7.5 grand for you submit a business plan, and it's got to be a viable business plan. You've got to have some stuff on the boil. But it was given to a guy from the Sunshine Coast called Josiah, he's got a band called Govs, who are really awesome. And I know that it helped him a lot, so I'm trying to do that again this year. So if anybody is going to apply for that, keep it in mind. It's called the JP Partnership. So yeah.
Yeah, I think really going on to that, just go for it. If you find an opportunity, there's opportunities, what Josh was describing.
There's lots of
so
opportunities.
Many.
There's not as many as would be of more benefit, but that's, especially with our current government, what do you expect when you have a fascist as a prime minister? So yeah, but there are opportunities out there. And the reality is, as much as people can say to you, you should just be happy being a musician because you're doing what you love. You do need to actually make money from it to be a professional musician and, pay your bills and whatnot. And getting that head start is really helpful. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities out there. There's a lot of competition for them, but I would definitely say just go for it, because the worst thing that's going to happen is you're not going to get it. I would say don't rely on it. Like, don't apply for a grant and then sit back and be like, this is going to be sweet, because you might not get it. And I've seen people do that, and it might not happen. So don't rely on it. Have a fallback plan. But yeah.
And take yourself seriously.
Yeah,
so
do it properly. It's and I know this now because of having started the grant. I actually went through, there was almost 200 applications last year, and I literally went through all of them by myself because I wanted to really own this thing. And some of them were just stupid, It was just like, hey mate, check this out. My business plan is I want to be famous. Like, literally, some of it was literally like that. And you're like, no. So yeah, try hard, just, it's not a joke. Let's try to do it.
You were talking about being in a band, but you've also, so obviously, you're a quite successful solo artist, but you've co-written quite a bit. And I guess I wanted to know about the challenges that you've got when co-writing with other people, how much you prepare beforehand, or how you kind of mediate your creativity.
Well, it's a really difficult thing, co-writing, and nobody should think that it's not, because it's when it goes well, it's amazing, like really it is easy, but there's always a chance that it's going to be terrible. And I've had ones where you rock up and you come out with 2 songs and they're both really good. And then I've also had situations where you're literally just sitting in a room together with this person that you've just met, going like, have you got anything? Because I don't have anything. Have you got anything? And then you just do that for like 4 hours. And I did this one with an artist, I won't mention the name, but it was a 2-day co-write, and the first day was just nothing. It was just didn't get anything done, and I pretty much wrote a song, and this person was like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it. I was like, okay, well, what have you got? And they're like, yeah, I don't really have anything. And then we like went out to a cafe, and I was like, well, let's try something. Let's just sit here and write some constant stream of consciousness stuff and see if we can come up with something. And I wrote like 2 pages of it, and then at the end I was like, so what do you got? This person's like, yeah, no, I don't really have anything. Is that my thing, or what is that?
It's the jack on the hand or something.
Anyway, so it can be really, really hard, but I always do prepare 1 or 2 little ideas that I think have promise, based on what I know of the artist, and I always approach them before going into the session, talk to them about what direction they want to take, if they want to move away from what they've done previously or whatever, and just say, can you bring just one idea just in case we've got nothing? But I like to actually try and go in there and, collaborate from the get-go. But it's really different for every artist. There's I did a song with Carice Eden, which was it's a great track. I'm not sure what's happening with it, but I was told that she liked to have something prepared. So I prepared something for that, and she came in, and I could tell that it was like a real relief. She was like, okay, I got it, I've got a vision here, I can pursue this vision. And she wrote some great lyrics for that. There's been other times when I've just, I did one with an artist called Mel, who goes by the name of East. And we had nothing. We walked in, neither of us had anything. I had a couple of things prepared, but I wanted to see if it would work just collaboratively. And we came up with a great song straight away. And it was literally, in my studio, I've got like piano, some random instruments. But on this particular time, I just had an iPad app that is generates random loops. And I just got one loop up, and then I started playing a little chord progression over the top, and she's sang to that, and straight away it sounded really cool. So it's really different for everyone, but the thing that I would say is if you are in the position where somebody's asked to co-write with you, it is kind of your responsibility to create something from the session, and there's a lot of pressure, and it also involves you taking the responsibility for recording the track and kind of producing the track up to a point where people can hear some promise in it. So it can be really, really fun, but it is a big challenge. And yeah, if it's easy, if you find it really, really easy, then I would say stick with that person that you're co-writing with and pursue more stuff, because that's a rare thing.
Have you ever really co-written with someone that's kind of completely taken your usual creative methods and just blown them out of the water, or are you usually writing with people on the same track as you?
I mean, I write with lots of different artists that from different genres and stuff, but I really don't, because I'm not writing for myself, I don't approach it with any kind of habits anyway, so I always try and be very open to just straight away doing something different. But I mean, in terms of end results, like I remember I did a track with Katie Noonan and I wrote it on acoustic guitar and she sang, and it was this really acoustic song, and when she recorded it for her record it was quite electronic, and it was so great to hear this thing that we'd created in this, you know, just in a really organic kind of acoustic way, and hearing it turn into something really different, but still hearing the song. You know, it was really quite. I love seeing something that you've started out in a kind of familiar territory turning into something very different. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wayne, I was going through your list of people that you've worked with, and I was kind of like, oh, can you send me a list of who you haven't worked with? Because I think that might be a bit shorter. Because you've worked with, who did I write down here? Boy and Bear, Hungry Kids of Hungary, Paper Kites, Preachers, even Jimmy Barnes, You and I, Custard. Such an amazing list. But I guess I wanted to know, leading on from Josh's kind of talking about co-writing, you worked with solo artists and then you work with bands. I just wanted to know whether you think it's easier to work with individuals, or when you're working with bands, how you keep that balance between opinions in the band and what you're really looking for as well.
It's probably a little bit trickier to just work with one person, because then it's just two of you responsible for coming up with everything, and you're not really sure where it's all going to go. You're kind of feeling your way, and some songs, like early on with Josh, working on that song Gold Mines on his first EP, I think we just kept putting ideas on and throwing all these things onto it, not really knowing where we were going. And the very last thing we put on was a kick drum, and that suddenly made the song sound great, I think. And it's just a trial and error process almost, isn't it? It's like, and it's probably usually easier. A band has all their parts sorted out, and whilst you're working with the drummer on a part, the guitarist might be over there working and rehearsing on their part. So there's just more minds, and it's a bigger team to work with. And a big part of the job is resolving the conflicts, because there's going to be conflict, and that's just normal. It's sort of human nature. And I think, Boy and Bear was a really interesting example, because they're lovely people and pretty fiery about their opinions, so they just won't usually budge too far, but they'll always listen, and they'll always try and weigh it up before they come up with an argument to support their own case. And there's lots of instances on that record of me just having long arguments with, the drummer, Tim particularly, pretty good-natured, but he would want, a certain part to be the drums half time, and I'd be like, no, they've got to be 4/4 straight time, and we'd sort of argue for days, and then he would go around and he'd try and corral his people, and I'd corral my people, and just keep working around. And I'd be interested to know now whether he thinks that, because I ended up winning a few of those battles. I'd be interested to know now what he thinks. But
I think the public's spoken. It's a gold record.
The public has spoken. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But certainly in what I do, that's fascinating, endlessly fascinating to resolve the disputes between people, and every band is totally different. And usually, you've got to be a poker face. You've got to hold your got to hold your cards to try and work out what's going on first. And there'll always be subtext, particularly if there's two songwriters in a band. Whenever I see that, I'm like, there's probably going to be eventual conflict there, because it's just hard. And I've been in that situation where I've been in a band with 3 songwriters, and you know that it's just a constant strain to try and get your songs across, and everyone's sort of fighting for their own songs. And
you also have an iron will, which possibly I don't reckon people would often know about you, because you're a very affable guy, but he's definitely got an iron will.
If I really am passionate about something, I'm prepared to argue for a very long time about it. And if I don't win, it'll usually be like, well, let's just try my idea as well. We'll try both ideas, and then we'll weigh it up after the fact, sort of thing.
But in your role with your band, Knievel, how do you balance being, a producer and an engineer, and then suddenly switching hats to a songwriter, and how do you balance that? Is it hard, or
it's not very easy? No, it's pretty difficult in many respects, I think, and that's why our band's always been more on the hobby side of things. We've played the big day out and done all those things, but we've never really committed to it in a big way, which is probably why no one's ever heard of us. But it's
good. Check them out; they're really awesome.
But it's exactly that. We've been on major labels, and we could have probably forged a better career. And the fact that I've been working always 12 hours a day in a studio, 5 or 6 days a week for literally the last 20 years probably, means that you can't really do much else. You can only do a little bit of music on the weekends. Yeah. So it's not easy. Yeah. I wouldn't advise it if you want to be a musician. It's not that easy to go and be a full-time producer as well.
And do both.
Yeah.
Pick one. You guys have worked together quite a lot. And I guess I wanted to know, from your first kind of project together to your most recent, how that's evolved. If you can give us any stories about conflicts or maybe getting along with so early, and what your relationship is now creatively working together.
Sort of hard to say, isn't it? I guess we started out pretty small, didn't we? Recording in Josh's parents' front room. So some of that first EP was done there.
Wow.
I guess the first time we met was at that gig in Bondi, and I think you told me afterwards that you thought I hated it.
So which gig in Bondi?
The Regis or the Bond?
Oh, yeah, far out. Totally forgot about that.
And you said to me, I thought you hated it.
I don't
so we began from humble beginnings, and
the first thing I remember about you was having a conversation on the phone, and I was working at the record store, and in my dinner break, because the guys at the label had suggested Wayne to do the EP, and I'd listened to all the stuff and everything. I was super excited, and the first thing that struck me was you had a really good sense of humour, and for me, it's a big deal doing a record, and I was really quite stressed about it, and that kind of put me at ease a bit. And I don't remember that gig thing. I do remember the gig. It was just a solo gig.
Down the beach road.
Yeah. I remember sitting on a stool. That's what I remember about that gig. I don't usually sit down. I don't remember thinking that you hated it, but maybe you did hate it, and then you just
I loved it. I was just amazed that I loved it, and you thought I hated it, and I was like, wow, I got to work on my facial thing.
But the big thing for me was that this was a really big thing for me, because I'd done a couple of other things. Before I worked with Wayne, I'd been overseas, and I'd worked with a guy called Michael Brower, and not Michael Brower. Who's the guy, the crazy scientist that I've told you about?
I always forget his name. He was Daniel Lanoir's assistant.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy, I can't remember his name now, but he was
Malcolm Byrne.
Anyway, he was, gracious enough to host me at his house in upstate New York, and I was recording there with him. But I was not feeling anything we did. I was just not into it at all. And he wasn't a particularly easy guy to get along with either. And he kind of freaked me out. And it was the first time that I'd done, a lot of recording, and I was staying at this guy's house, and it was full on. And so I was quite wary. Oh, and he was also quite proprietary about his techniques and stuff. And I'm really interested in production and engineering and stuff like that. So I was really wanting to know stuff. And he was kind of not, he wasn't sharing a lot. And he literally said to me, you got to understand, you're dealing with an amazing musical being here. And at first I thought he was talking about me. At first I was like, wow, thank you, wow. And then I realized he was talking about himself. And I was like, I don't know about this. So I was kind of locking my door at night every night. But anyway, it was a weird situation. So working with Wayne, the biggest thing from the get-go is that, and I asked if he minded, but I had a book, and I was literally taking notes of all, down to Pro Tools keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. And Wayne was always incredibly generous with his knowledge. I've worked with Paul McKercher as well. It's the same thing, just really open with their knowledge, not thinking that it's kind of, I don't know, I don't need to know what somebody would think. But so that was a big thing that struck me early on, and it really kind of made me feel well, like it was a true collaboration rather than, I don't know, like the other situation where I was being told that I was working with an amazing musical being, not even a human, just a being.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's part of it, I think, is you've got to be adaptable and you've got to get a sense of what people want to get out of a project and not be too precious about trying to keep all the knowledge or do things a certain way, because you already had good techniques as well and I was learning stuff from you, and it's kind of like, it is a bit of a learning curve and a sharing experience for everyone. I try to keep that in mind.
What's it like now, coming from, like, now that you're a bit, probably a lot, well, I hope you're a little bit more at ease with each other now after a few projects under your belt?
Yeah, well, the last one we did was the record before this most recent one, and Wayne did the whole record, and it was, I mean, we were kind of straight into, we had a really good working relationship. I mean, it's like, I feel very fortunate. There's not ever been any conflict. The only thing ever that's been difficult is Wayne keeps way longer hours than I can handle. I just can't. He's like a workaholic, and I just become unproductive after about midnight. Whereas Wayne can push through to like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, which is what the
not
producer.
So much now.
Maybe not so much now after post-children, but that's kind of at the points when those things were happening. That's what needed to happen to get the project finished on time, and I just couldn't keep up really. But for the record, Only Sparrows, I wanted it to be a really collaborative record, and we worked with the band and stuff. And it was kind of like, I was thinking I wanted to do something really different. I was like, I want to make like an indie rock record, and I was thinking of all these producers overseas to work with and stuff like that. And then my wife was like, "You want an indie rock record? Why aren't you working with Wayne again? He's like the indie rock guy." I was like, "Fuck, what am I doing?" And so and then I was just like, oh, "Of course I should be doing this with Wayne." And then it was it was pretty smooth really. It was I can't think of any conflict unless you can.
Well, there was a bit more of choosing songs on that one, wasn't there? There was a lot of songs,
yeah, that's true.
And there was specific things the record company thought, and I suppose trying to pick that. I was a bit more involved in picking the tracks for that record.
Yeah, that's true.
You're going on about choosing songs for an album. How do you kind of go through that process of listening to the songs that you've got available and then kind of curating them into an album? Is there a set method that you use, or?
Well, you've got to listen to them a fair bit. You've got to really take one good, clean listen without distractions, is what I have to do, and make sure the first listen, because that's going to be the first time you're going to get all these impressions, you have to write down a lot of stuff the very first time you hear a song. But then you kind of have to give it a few more chances as well and give it another 5 or 6 listens. And I suppose you're sort of training yourself throughout your life. I've listened to a lot of music and I have tried to write music. And I think the fact that I've tried to write music for so long, since I was a kid, and I've never found it easy, I think that's made me good at being able to pick songs, because I can hear the pitfalls and I can hear the traps of slightly lazy or ordinary songwriting. So to me, the fact that I'm not a great songwriter makes me kind of really. I mean, I think I've written songs that have come out really good, but I've written a lot that haven't. So I've got a bit of a sense of when a great song comes along, I can recognise it pretty easily, I think.
Yeah.
But I think just obviously it changes across all different genres. You can never really say, but a lot of time in choosing songs for an album too, a band might want to do, like Boy and Bear wanted to do a lot of big slow burners that were big blustering songs, and I sort of feel like there isn't that much room on an album for more than 2 or 3 of those. And so that was a lot of the conflict with that record, is trying to make them see that having some good up-tempo, brighter moments, you need kind of plenty of that to capture people's imagination, because
it's definitely lights and darks. So the thing is, these days, it's questionable whether or not the album is as important as it used to be. But I personally think that it is, and I reckon my sort of core fan base still likes albums. And as a songwriter, I don't just write singles. I don't sit down and just write single after single. I don't even ever write singles. I just write songs, and then if one of those songs turns out to be a song that could be considered a single, then that's great. But I can't really it's hard to sit down and go, okay, now I'm going to write the single for the next album. Lots of people do that, and that's a totally legitimate way to do it, but I can't personally do that. So when I'm writing, I'll have a collection of 20 songs or whatever, and then putting the record together, it's hard to be objective. So from the artist's point of view, you're really relying on the producer and not just the producer, but other people to kind of listen to the finished work and think about the peaks and troughs as it goes, and tells a kind of story. And sometimes songs are connected in funny ways that you didn't even realise, and they kind of they bookend almost like a story arc of a whole album that you didn't even necessarily realise was there, and it takes some objectivity to see those things. So choosing songs is probably a lot harder for the artist than for the producer, because you get so attached to some songs, And it's like that song Particles. I didn't even think it would make the record, and then it became like one of my favourite tracks on that record. So it's hard.
But it's interesting you say that, because the labels now, it's quite often it's very different. They're sort of treating it like, well, okay, go away, write a hit single. When you've done that, then we can think about doing an album. That's very much the approach now, and it puts a lot of pressure on you. It's pretty unnerving, really. It's just like,
you got one shot.
Yeah, go and make the hit single, get it on Triple J, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do.
Yeah,
and I think you can do that.
You
can sort of force out the music, but I think sometimes forcing out a great lyric's harder. So perhaps the lyrics are suffering in this day and age because things are being forced out, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's fine for pop music, and I think that it's a different world, but it's a pretty significantly different world, the world of pop, top 40 and R&B and everything.
Yeah.
I really like some of that music, but a band like Boy and Bear's a good example, I think, where they've really found commercial success, but through just writing really good, heartfelt songs. And it can still happen, but I guarantee, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure that they weren't told to go away and write the single first and then...
No, their second record, I think, because they had a big hit, but their first one, they were very determined for no one to tell them what to do. I was allowed to because I was working with them, but the label weren't allowed to be involved, and that was interesting. So it was very much...
Which is, really...
their own vision to a certain extent.
That's a big move to make early on in
Yeah,
your
but
career.
you're right, it's hard to do now, I think.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, a record label's investing $100,000 into your album or whatever, so you're going to need to sell approximately, you're talking like you're probably going to have to sell 20, 30,000 records to even break even for the label, let alone for yourself. And then nobody sells that many records anymore, so it's an intense amount of pressure. If you don't do that, then the label's an accountant is going to look at the balance sheet and go, okay, we gave this person a shot, it's going to be cheaper to move on and invest the money in somebody else. So.
Yeah, which kind of goes against the old method of giving people those longer deals so they could hit their stride and have that amazing album rather than going, do it immediately.
There's lots of issues with long deals as well, though.
Yeah.
But maybe that's another different...
I wanted to kind of close the session off also hopefully grabbing a song out of you, Josh, but I just wanted to close it off knowing these guys who are really starting out. If you've got any kind of hints or tips or anything that you think for someone starting out to really get their stride going.
Well, it's obviously a lot easier now with all the technology available, and Logic is such a cheap and amazing program. Yeah. So, technically, it's got so much easier for people. Back in the days when I started, it was all trying to buy a 8-track reel-to-reel and everything like that. In some ways, a lot of what I do is all about relationships too. That's a really important part of it. And I think people that I've met over the years, just randomly, Andy Kelly, who managed the Vines and everything. I just met him when he was a bass player in a band, and it's partly the relationships that have enabled me to have a career out of music, and that's not coming from being a networker or something, because I'm not naturally like that, but it's having a really passionate belief in music, and I've always loved music since I was probably 3 or 4, and if you've got that sort of passion and drive, then obviously you find that you'll meet people who have the same passion and drive, and it's makes everything a lot easier. But yeah, technically I think it's you've also got your YouTubes and everything now that show you how to do everything. So you kind of if you have specific questions, you could ask at the end. But I guess I wouldn't make any technical recommendations apart from those simple things like Logic, simple systems like that, and having a good preamp and a good mic and maybe a good compressor. And depending on the style of music you're doing, then you can obviously do a lot just with those simple things.
Okay.
Sorry, one more thing, I guess. It depends, though, if you are in a band where you've got a live drummer and live instruments, then you're in a different position where you can't necessarily just, set up in your house and record an album. It can be done, but you might live in a flat, as a lot of people do in Sydney. That just comes down to geography, where if you live in Brisbane, you're probably more likely to make a record in your house, and in Sydney you might not. So I guess if you're in a band, then you might find it easier to focus on saving to go and record in a studio and work with someone and take that approach, because it's not a bad way to learn things, and it's not a bad way to kind of get things happening quicker, essentially, like fast tracking things rather than just fiddling around for a couple of years trying to work out the best way to record something.
Yeah. Josh, you got any starting out tips?
I guess like the biggest thing that I've always thought is, and this is definitely from personal experience, is just that you can't sit around waiting for somebody to discover you. It's not going to happen. It does happen occasionally where people do make a YouTube video and start doing covers of other acts on YouTube, and they get 1 million hits and they get a career out of that. That certainly has happened. There is definitely a precedent for that happening, but that is extremely rare. I mean, it's like winning the lottery, that. So I think you can't just wait for somebody to just walk in your door and discover you. I reckon the best songwriter in the world is sitting in their bedroom playing songs, and nobody's ever going to hear about them because they're just not going to kind of push themselves. And I think that, nobody's, also the big thing is that nobody's ever going to believe in your music more than you are. You can have managers and labels and, all these people involved in your career, but at the end of the day, it is your heart and soul that you're putting out there, and they will do it's not saying they're not going to do an amazing job for you, but they can move on. If you don't go well, they can move on to another project. You can't move on from yourself. So you've really got to back yourself and create your own opportunities. And like Wayne said, anybody can make an album these days for relatively cheap. I've heard like great sounding records that are done on Logic on a laptop with one dynamic mic and a set of headphones. You can absolutely do that, but that doesn't mean that there's so many steps in between that and actually making a career in music. And I wish that there was a way of saying, like, there's 20 steps. You get good at songwriting, then you make a recording of it, and then you follow these 20 steps, and you can be sweet. But it just doesn't work like that. So unfortunately, you have to basically throw everything at the wall and then see what sticks, and then pursue the things that are starting to go well, pursue them. So for instance, you could put all your stuff up on YouTube and get 1 million hits, and if that's happening, then obviously you pursue that and you develop that. Or you could find that you're an excellent performer, and every time you perform, you get 20 new fans, and you do that 50 times a year, and then you've got a solid fan base. And a great example is Passenger of that, who busked. Legitimately, the way he developed such a huge fan base, was from busking first, because he's such a compelling performer, But then there's other people that are really bad performers but are excellent songwriters. So maybe you figure out that you're actually a great songwriter, but performing is not your strong suit. So you pursue the songwriting. So there's lots of ways to have a career in music, but unfortunately, there's no direct route to any of them, and you have to just try everything. And I would say, like, being really flexible with your skill set is really important to have a career in music these days. Like being able to co-write, being able to do a bit of producing, being able to perform, and being able to speak at panels like this. That was a joke. Thank you very much. Good night.
Could you please play us?
Yeah, I'll play a song.
Josh?
I thought I'd just play quickly. I thought I'd play Middle of the Hill because it's the song that kind of kicked things off for me, and also Wayne recorded it. And this is a good example of a song that started out as a demo on a bunch of equipment that cost about $1,500, and then excuse me, and then Wayne and I developed it up and turned it into something release-worthy. You remember this? Remember this track? You want to sing the harmonies? All right.
When I was a kid, I grew up in a house on a hill. Not the top, not the bottom, but the middle. And I still remember where I cracked my head. In the vacant lot, there's a row of tiny houses there now. And we used to light fires in the gutters, and I could cool my head on the concrete steps. But the girl down the street hit my sister on the head with a stick, and we hid behind my father as he knocked on her parents' door to tell him what she did. But the parents were drunk, so they really didn't give a shit. Then the girl down the street said a dog couldn't bark 'cause a man with an axe cut his voice box out. My older sister told me that it probably wasn't true, and I believe what she said 'cause she took me by the hand one time. A couple men drove down the hill in a white van, said there was a phone box filled with money round the corner, and I would have gone along. She took me by the hand to the house in the middle of the hill, the middle of the hill, the middle of the hill. And our mother knew the words to a lot of different songs, and we'd always sing the harmonies when we'd sing along. She had cool, cool hands when the fever hit. Then the noises that the trains made sounded like people in my head. And the stories that the ceiling told through the pictures in the grains on the pine wood boards. And I could stay outside till the sky went red, and I could cool my head on the concrete steps. Could never really see the top from the bottom. I don't pay enough attention to the good things when I got them. Could never really see the top from the bottom. I don't pay enough attention to the good things when I got them. And pay enough attention to the good things when I got them. And pay enough attention to the good things when I got them. And pay enough attention to the good things when I got them. And pay enough attention to the good things when I got them. No.
Thank you.
It's good.
I think that that song to me is such a perfect example of when you don't have to always rhyme lyrics. I think some people are always like, you have to go, hey baby, but maybe, and that song is like, just go for it, just say what you need to say. We've got a little bit of time for some questions from the crowd, if anyone had some questions they wanted to ask Wayne.
You've worked with a lot of psychos, Wayne, and part of being a producer, as you've said, is negotiating disputes, trying to get things on track, keep the core ideas of what makes something good from the start of when you work on something to the end of it. But that, without realising, a lot of people here won't realise how hard that is to do, actually, because a song is very fragile, and when it's being beset on many different sides by opinions and influence, it can possibly potentially lose what it had to begin with. How do you do that? What do you identify as the key elements of a song, and how do you protect those in the process of production? And also, how do you keep some of the egos that you're dealing with, some of which are really genuinely enormous and sometimes actually psychotic, away from ruining the thing that they're trying to create?
I agree, yes. I think, well, there's one good thing about what I do is there's a lot of goodwill when people come into a studio. They're actually living the dream. They've saved some money, or someone's paid for them to come to a studio. So it's kind of a nice moment where they're going, wow, this is the opportunity. It's a nice environment. So there's a lot of goodwill and a lot of trust, and people sort of trust me because I've done a few records before. And so even, working with someone like, say, Craig Nichols, who's a lovely guy, but he's got a certain chaos about him.
Could you tell that's who I was talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell that's who I was talking about?
I thought you might be, yeah. But yeah, he's chaotic for sure. But to see him in a studio is to see him at his happiest and his most joyful up to a point. I mean, and he, out of the chaos, it's just fascinating to see him create, his music. I guess someone like him, he's got a very singular vision. He knows exactly what he wants, and everybody is kind of just trying to read what he wants. Even the band, everyone's trying to read what Craig is trying to achieve. because I think he was a unique, you know, and unique visionary. Really, he could see something that at the time other people couldn't. So my job would often be just to try and read the artist's mind, even like particularly with Craig, could never really verbalise it. It would take you weeks to work out what he was thinking. Well, for instance, like he would be someone who, when I was trying to do vocals with him, it took 2 weeks, and he pretty much just primal screamed the whole first week and a half, and it was really hard to record anything. And I couldn't work out what it was, but to him, the issue of the loudness of consonants was the problem. He thought that, and I'm not saying this to belittle him, because he had a very sophisticated ear, and if he heard a consonant like a C or a P be too loud when he sang it, it would drive him crazy. And now I can see that feeds into his vision of music as being a very fluid, dreamlike thing. And so the fact that the C's and the P's were too loud would drive him absolutely spare. And so it took me ages to work that out. And through all the chaos, he never said that really, but it was like kind of...
That is a specific thing to have to
figure out. It was very specific, yeah. So they're the sort of things you could come up against in a studio.
I think we've got a question down the front.
Yeah. In terms of when it comes to negativity, as you've probably experienced a lot from when you were starting out as a musician up until like when it comes to album reviews, and I'm more or less thinking about like, for a lot of us, since we are quite young and susceptible, how do you stop things like, you know, people being overly critical or people, you know, ultimately insulting your work from affecting you and your judgment and ultimately how you write?
Yeah, it's a good question. It can be really tough, like because when you're starting out, you don't even have an audience that you're writing for. You're just writing for yourself. So you're your own harshest critic, and then suddenly you're putting stuff out there, and you know it's something that you just have to accept that it's going to be judged to a large degree. I mean, it'll be judged in one way or another every time, you know, like it'll be judged when somebody plays it if they click through and to the next song. That's a judgment. It'll be judged if somebody changes the station on the radio or just like listens to it once and puts it in the bin, you know. So you just have to get your head around it. You just have to go, well, this is what I love doing. And for me, the big barometer of kind of getting over that, because there's two things. Playing live is a true barometer of whether or not you're connecting with somebody. And so I feel very fortunate to be a successful touring act, and when I play live, people want to be there, and I know that they want to be there because they paid for the ticket, and so I try my best, and you get this instant gratification thing where you're kind of bouncing off each other, you do your best, they appreciate it. So that's a really good thing, and that kind of like refills my confidence for the times when my confidence gets smashed by a bad review or a negative comment by somebody in the press or whatever. That's my situation as a, you know, a known artist or whatever. For people starting out, I would say you just have to train, you just have to harden up, and unfortunately that's just the way it is, because it's really brutal, you know, like it can be just your friends, or like I remember in year 10, I did a performance at my high school, and this guy was like, you're not a very good singer. And up until that point, that had been like literally the only thing in my whole life that I'd ever been any good at, ever. You know, that was the thing. I could sing. I knew that I could sing. I thought I knew I could sing. And I'd had lots of people, you know, telling me that I could sing. And then this one guy, one comment, after having heard many times that I could sing, to the point where I had the confidence to sing in front of my school, one guy said that I couldn't sing, and I was absolutely devastated. And it completely rattled my confidence. And you kind of have to train your brain to see what's rationally happening, which is that you've had a lot of positive feedback, you feel good about it, you love your work, then you're getting one negative feedback. One negative feedback should not rationally outweigh all the other positive reinforcement. You have to train your brain to believe that. It's very difficult because we're humans, and I think it's fair to say that artists can be reasonably sensitive or whatever. The other thing is, like when you're thinking about blogs and stuff and reviewers, absolutely no disrespect to reviewers and stuff, because I used to write for Brag when it was called Brag, and I wrote reviews for bands like The Hives, I didn't get it when I first heard that band, and I wrote a really bad review, and then like years later I'm like, totally love that band. I just didn't get it at the time. And you have to also kind of think, so for instance, you have to think, maybe this person just doesn't get it. They don't get it. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm actually bad. They just don't get it. Their sensibilities don't align with my own. And it's just unfortunate that they have a public forum in which to air their view, but it doesn't actually give it the legitimacy that it's often attributed with. They're just dudes at their computer listening to music. They're just the same as you. Their opinion is not worth any more than yours. It's just that it happens to be being published, and sometimes, with very little readership anyway.
Any negativity that you do get from fans and stuff, do you ever bring that into your songwriting, like write songs about that sort of...
Taylor Swift.
Do you ever use that to help?
They call it.
I definitely have. Not. I mean, I think that this is true, and so this is what I'm saying rationally. I'm going with this. I actually haven't had that much negative feedback from fans. I've definitely had negative reviews and stuff, but they're not fans, so I just kind of go, well, it's not for everybody. But I've definitely written 2 very, very cynical songs about the music industry in general and the negativity that I found within the music industry and the things that frustrate me about the music industry. And yeah, I mean, negativity is a great... I would say like 80% of my songs are fueled by negative emotions because it's kind of the way that I've always processed those things. Got them out of my system so that I can be a normal functioning person and not be smacking my kids every day, Every day. Every second day.
Oh, we've got time for one last question.
I don't smack my children, just want you to know that.
Not hard, not hard.
I mean, just like fun, just wrestling, roughhousing.
This is for Josh. Was there a certain bit of inspiration? Was there a certain thing that you were inspired by for that first song that you wrote? And what kind of things do you focus on from your passions that you use as inspiration for writing songs?
Are you talking about the first song I ever wrote in my life, or just? Oh, Middle of the Hill. Well, that song was literally. So I was 24 or 25 when I wrote that song, which is relatively old to be. I'd been trying hard to be a professional musician since I was 17 when I left school or whatever. And I'd been living out of home. I'd worked for a record label. I was living a pretty fun young life. And then I got made redundant from that job, and I decided that I wanted to pursue music. And in order to pursue music, I had to move back home with my folks at 25, and I felt really bummed about that. I felt like a real failure. But so sitting in the bedroom that I'd grown up in, and I was playing guitar, and I just started writing this constant stream of consciousness song about, about kind of childhood memories and valuing, your family. And, the end line is, I don't pay enough attention to the good things when I got them. And I was kind of reinforcing to myself that actually, whilst I might have felt like a failure, this is a good thing that I had the support to even allow myself to pursue this dream. So that was kind of where the inspiration came from. That it's kind of a homage, is that what the word is, to my family and kind of where I came from and where I was hoping to go. And and even when I play that song even today and I get to that part of the song, it always kind of snaps me back to how lucky and how grateful I am to be doing this for a living. But in terms of inspiration in general, it comes from, I've always written from personal experience. And even when I'm not specifically writing about things that have happened to me, I try and kind of empathise with the situation enough that I can turn it into something that I can relate to, but also that I hope lots of people can relate to. So, for instance, a song like Clover Suns off the record before last was inspired by a painting that hangs at the National Gallery there. In the National Gallery? No, that's in Canberra, isn't it? The Art Gallery across the New South Wales Gallery, yeah. And it's a painting that I'd seen many, many times growing up, and one time I saw it and kind of saw it in a different light and got fascinated by it and looked up the history of the painting, and I won't bore you with the details, but that inspired a whole kind of thought process, and that led to the song Clover Sun. So the song itself is not necessarily about the painting, and it's not even necessarily about the story of the painting, it's about what that whole thought process, it led to one big question for me, which was the relativity of truth. That's what the song is about. So, yeah. And then I just read No Country for Old Men, and you know, a big theme in that book is how all of us, there's a line that we could all cross every day into a different life that we either choose to or not to. And so the song is not necessarily inspired by the book, it's inspired by what the book made me question. So yeah, I try not to be like writing about specific things particularly, as opposed to shrouding stuff in enough metaphor and imagery that other people can kind of relate to it as well.
I think that's great. You're talking about being inspired by art and books, and I think really that's what kind of Vivid is all about culture and mixing with all the
ideas.
different
I mean,
art forms.
I would
It's
say
awesome.
in general, like the best thing to do is just to read, and you know, like I was saying before about trying to structure time to make music and stuff. Sometimes my days are literally, I'm just reading books or I'm following some trail of thought and researching different ideas, because you just have to fill up your gas tank with you know, ideas and lots of ideas, and then all that stuff just subconsciously percolates beneath the surface, and then when it comes time to, you know, when you have something to say, you just suddenly have all this stuff which you can draw upon, where, you know, if you're just sitting around writing baby, 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 I got rabies, it's just not going to
I want to hear that song. All right, I just wanted to
Great
thank
track,
you guys. You guys have been great. It's been a pleasure and a treat. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you all. That was fantastic. And Josh, thank you so much for the song. Another round of applause for our incredible panel. Thank you to Lucia for moderating for us. Great job, guys.